Hello, everybody. My name is Christian. I'm the host of the Disruptive Chef Entrepreneur Show. And I know I say this at every episode, but you guys going to love today's guest. Not only is he amazingly good in what he does, he wrote some books. You know what? He has a podcast. He started a company at something called COVID. And, okay, that's all I'm going to tell you. You guys going to meet him right after this. Hello again. My name is Christian. I'm the host of the Disruptive Chef Entrepreneur Show, and I'm really excited for today's conversation. We met this gentleman actually before he knew we knew him. So we called it ethical stalking. So what we did about 100 episodes for the people which listen, we said, hey, we need to find some new people to bring on to our platform. And so we checked out some people we admired, and this guy's name always came up. He is the CEO of a company called Benchmark 60. He started a company during COVID. He wrote just recently a book. He did some other really cool, amazing things. But what I love is the way he looks at data-driven decision making. And we talk a lot about that. And I'm really excited for you guys to meet an amazing human being. His name is Jim Taylor. Thanks for being here at the Disruptive Chef Entrepreneur Show.
Thanks, Christian. What an introduction. I better show up well here.
So talk to us how this whole thing started. You have an amazing resume, by the way. So help our listeners to understand, how did Jim Taylor to come to be, and how did you wind up to be the CEO of a company called Benchmark 60, write a book, and do all the other stuff you do?
Well, it's funny when people ask me that question, I always start the answer the same way. And that is that I was the 12-year-old kid whose parents taught me to open bottles of wine and beer so that I could serve their friends at their Christmas party. And that was my introduction to hospitality, and I fell in love with the service and vibe and excitement of what that's all about. That's not necessarily what got me to where I am now, but that was my start in hospitality. I worked in the corporate part of the restaurant world for a long time. I was with a big Canadian restaurant brand for just over 20 years. And I think, we don't need to get into all the details of that, but kind of worked my way up through the organization. And what got me to the point where I was going to accidentally start a business in the middle of a pandemic was my role for a long time in that organization was I called myself the translator. I was the person who spent time with the finance and analytics department and would help translate that information so that we could talk to the GMs and the district managers and the chefs about what that information was telling us.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the middle of the pandemic, I realized a whole bunch of my friends that owned restaurants or worked in restaurants were struggling, where they were maybe going out of business. They were trying to find ways to stay in business. And I just wanted to help. And I had this skill where I could translate this information in a quick way to help them understand how they could make decisions, more strategically or faster. So Benchmark 60 was accidentally born in 2020 because out of an urge I needed to make a change. I wanted to make a change, and I just wanted to help.
I love that story. So, but go back a little bit, because you were on a few advisory boards, you did some other stuff. So where was the pivoting point for you to say, hey, I need to start Benchmark 60 because I can reach a bigger audience. I can have a bigger impact?
Well, it was a couple of things, sort of mid-late 2020, early 2021. I was on a couple of advisory boards, again, because some people that I knew after when I was a free agent and left the corporate ops world.
Yeah.
Again, things just sort of came up. There was some opportunity to try to help. The Benchmark 60 portion started when I realized that, for one, I had started generating some content about what was happening in the restaurant space, my personal opinions, my observations, my conversations with operators. And that started to get a little bit of traction, and there was some discussion about maybe some bigger opportunity and ways to help. But also I realized, I think really quickly, that it was one thing to position or to put myself in front of the restaurant world as I'm Jim Taylor and I want to help, versus this is a brand and this is a business and this is a company and here's what we specialize in. So it was kind of, the analogy that I've used a lot in the last few years is that if I want to get I don't know, I want to get a sandwich from a local shop, I probably go to the Subway to get a sandwich from the brand. I don't
Mhm.
necessarily go to Subway to see the person that I know at Subway to buy a sandwich from them.
Yeah, yeah.
So I kind of aligned it with that sort of, what are the brands that I follow? What are their values? What do I like? And how do I sort of create that for myself?
I love that. And so, if you don't mind, I'm interested in. It sounded like you had a really good job. You had
Had a
some.
great job.
You were on boards. Why the hell would you want to start your own company, especially during COVID? And I know the reason I'm asking this question because there's probably be a few hundred, if not a few thousand people listening to this, which are in the same boat. They love what they do. They know, it's secure. I do what I do, but I know deep down I'm driven. I know I have a greater purpose than being just an employee. So help our audience understand that a little bit. What was that? What was going on inside you? And what was for you that pivoting point says, you know what, I just go out and I do it.
Well, there's definitely a few things there. And to be really clear, I had an amazing job.
Hmm.
The company that I worked for was incredibly supportive, incredibly focused on training and development and structure. And I say this to people all the time that I lived a very sheltered restaurant life. It wasn't the real normal everyday independent restaurant space. It was a very corporate
Yeah.
environment, that kind of thing. But I started to realize things like, and interestingly enough, here we are on the disruptive, chef, right? I my values on how I viewed things like how do we take care of people in the industry,
Mhm.
why aren't some of the mainstream strategies, or sorry, the strategies that exist in some of those sheltered corporate environments, why aren't they impacting the mainstream part of the industry the same way? Why is it that the independent that makes up 60 or 70 or even 80% of the industry in some markets, why don't they have the opportunity to, have access to some of those things?
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of it that was just sort of starting to think about, I feel like there's a way that I could help. There was even a more of an emotional pull when I had friends that needed help,
Yeah.
right? Friends that were, there was one of the first restaurants that I ever spent time with after I left my corporate role was a husband and wife that I knew in the community. I had done some work with the wife at one point years ago, and she called me and said, our friends and family day, getting ready to open our brand new restaurant that we just
Yeah.
invested our life savings into. Friends and family happened in March of 2020. So they launched their new concept, dream business, investing all their money in. They launched with no government support and only doing takeout. And on top of that, they'd never even run a restaurant before. She'd never even
Wow.
been a general manager of a restaurant before. So, there was this emotional pull. And then I actually told myself I was going to take some time off when I left that corporate role. And I lasted about 3 weeks before I started, hey, I want to help and how can I get involved? And I had no clue what I was doing. I just wanted to help.
I love that story. So where do you feel that entrepreneurial mindset come from? Because it takes a special person to do this. And looking at, you just said it. I had an amazing job. Like you could have probably done that forever. Where is that coming from? Where do you tie that back to?
A few things. One of them was that company that I worked for, one of their core philosophies, and I mean, I basically grew up there, right? I started working for them when I was 19 years old.
Mhm.
One of their core philosophies was it's your business,
Yeah.
right? And they were very supportive and very, created a very good entrepreneurial culture in that organization to, go out and look for ways to improve the business and drive sales and profit and those types of things. So I kind of, from a work experience perspective, that was sort of trained me. I played a lot of sports growing up, so I'm quite competitive. Um, and you know what? I have to say, I didn't know that I had entrepreneurial spirit until I was in it. And then
Mhm.
I started to go, oh, this is fun. Oh, there's an opportunity. Let's see what happens. Oh, maybe if I did this way, it would, generate this outcome. And I tell people now all the time that I believe that entrepreneurship is on repeat every single day. Let's try this and see if it works.
Yeah.
Let's try this and see if it works. Tomorrow, let's try this and see if it works. And if it works, do more of it. And if it doesn't work, do less.
Yeah, love
So
that.
I don't think I wasn't aware that I had any kind of entrepreneurial spirit until it was happening around me.
Mm. So then there's Benchmark 60. Talk to us. What is Benchmark 60? I love the name. What is the meaning to the name?
So when I was first again, I'll reiterate, I had no clue what I was doing. I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I thought I was going to get into the online course development sort of business. And I thought if I could build products for restaurant people that they could use anywhere in the world that would be applicable, today for a very, low barrier of entry, low price kind of thing. I thought that was where I was headed. And so the name Benchmark 60 came from the fact that those courses that I was building at the time were all benchmark and data driven, and they were designed to ROI in 60 days.
Love it.
So that's where the name came from. And as we pivoted away from, the course development priority sort of space, the name just sort of stayed, and it kind of became the brand.
That's awesome. So talk to our audience a little bit. How do you service currently the marketplace with Benchmark 60?
Yeah, it's evolved a ton. It started out as just me, as just Jim Taylor, founder and CEO of a one-person business, just doing one-on-one coaching with restaurant operators. Trying to impart experience and advisory and wisdom or whatever it might be. Now we do a whole broad range of things. So we still do lots of advisory and consultation with hospitality owners, operators, groups, whatever, on that business optimization, deeper understanding of the model, labor and employee retention focus, that type of stuff. We do lots of that kind of work. As you mentioned, I just released a book, so that kind of is an easy access way for people to get involved. Now we do actually have a formal course version of that people can also get exposed to. But then on top of that, we do lots of workshop type stuff, keynote for organizations around how to think differently about the industry, how to look through a new lens, and be more people focused on how we deal with that, the challenges in the industry. So we do a whole bunch of different things related to that.
So help us understand a little bit more. How do you currently service? What is different on Benchmark 60 versus some other programs out there? And talk to us a little bit. What is your process when you bring on a new client around that?
Sure. I think the easiest way to describe that is based on some of our core philosophies. One of them is that consulting by opinion doesn't work. So I always say it twice. Consulting by opinion doesn't work. And the reason I sort of realized that, and we focus really heavily on that, is that consultants in hospitality, for one, kind of have a bad rap, right? And maybe that's valid in some cases. But a lot of my experience watching from the sidelines and from acting as an internal consultant in a corporate environment is if we go into a space or a business and say, here's what I think you should do, or here's what the neighbor is doing, or here's what the industry does. It's very opinion driven, and it's hard to justify. It's hard to generate ROI based on those things. It's really difficult. So the first thing that we do in terms of working with any restaurant operator is everything we do is 100% data driven. Because if we can better understand the information that we have and that we have access to, and we can better interpret what it's telling us, we can make really quick, really accurate decisions on what to do with the business. So we spend all of our time interpreting data for our clients so that they can better understand what's happening.
I love that. And I really resonate what you said, because the challenge of old style consulting is, that opinion based, well, I love that term, is you can't scale it, and you can't do it after the guy leaves. The opinion guy is gone. What do I do next? And people fail. So I love the idea of data-driven decision making, because there's science behind it. And for me, the challenge with that old model of consulting is because we all have a bias. If I go in there and there's a certain thing in it, and it might not be good for that. So I'm sold. I absolutely love that. So, okay, you come in, I sign up with you. So what is the first thing you do with me?
The first thing we do is what we call concept clarity. So we do a deep dive on what is the business, what's happening. what's currently been happening, even if it's things that the current operator isn't even aware of or thinking of. So we would look at things like, what is the actual, what's on the menu, what's the
Yeah.
space like, what's the service model. Is it a fine dining restaurant with 4 table sections and a service assistant, or is it a Irish pub with 15 table sections and 100 beers on tap? Right? I
Hmm.
mean, they're so different. We get away from things really as quickly as we can, that are related at all to industry, what we call industry standard. You hear that term?
Hmm.
Industry standard leads people astray all the time. So we get away from, let's lose this industry standard thing. Let's get rid of any sort of consulting by opinion thoughts that might be happening. Let's do this concept clarity deep dive and really find out what is the business and what is it that the goals are of the company. Because
Hmm.
as soon as we know what's going on, we can then start to assess the information and make recommendation. You just made another comment too about, as soon as you leave, it's gone. So I should touch on that, because another one of our really important core philosophies is do with versus do for.
Hmm.
If we come in and do for, and this is, I believe, a challenge that our industry faces with people who jump into consulting, is that it ends up more like gig work than anything else.
Yeah.
It ends up
Agree.
being, I'm going to be the GM of this restaurant or the chef at this restaurant for 90 days. I'm going to turn it around. I'm going to find somebody to replace me, and I'm going to go on to my next gig.
Hmm.
Well, it's really a temporary job more than it is anything else.
Yeah.
Right. And so our approach is very much do with rather than do for. We spend a predetermined amount of time, 60, 90, you know, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, a predetermined amount of time every week with our partners and our clients. And the goal is to do with, so that it's evergreen. And
Mhm.
when we're gone, this lasts forever.
Yeah. And you can scale it. I mean, for me, I love the way you said it. It's a 90-day job, but that's what we were going into consulting because, you know what, I got laid off, but I want to do something on the side. They get in it and they do what they're comfortable with, and being comfortable with is, hey, I come in, I'm a problem, so I know I can solve it, but I am not good in teaching the other guy to be me. So I love the idea of working with, because working with takes the ownership away from you and to them, because they need to do it after you're gone. So I absolutely love
Right.
that. So talk to us a little bit. What is or who is your perfect avatar? So if any of our listeners are in a certain space,
Hmm.
what is the perfect avatar for you?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We've worked with all kinds of restaurant groups and in all kinds of spaces. The smallest was and I will answer this more specifically, but the smallest business we worked with in the last couple of years was a 10-seat cafe at a local Bible college. They're
Mm,
doing $350,000 a year in muffins and coffee, and they wanted to find better ways to manage their business model so they could better retain their people.
mm,
We spent 6 months with them.
that's
The
awesome.
largest restaurant group that we've spent time with in the last couple of years is a 100-unit group, franchise group across Canada.
Hmm.
Lots of 30 to 40 unit size groups in the US and Canadian markets. But where we spend the most time and where we're like where we get the best return and the best result is 2 to 10 unit, 2 to 15 unit, privately owned independent restaurant groups. And the reason I say 2 units and not one is because there's an amazing difference what happens when the owner isn't running one restaurant. They're not on the fryer on Friday night, right? They're
Hmm.
not the maitre d' at the front door. They've got 2 locations, and they're able to step above or around and look at what's happening in the business. They're able to invest a little bit more time usually.
Hmm. And that's usually also the person which has learned, hey, I need to let go of certain things. I can't control
Absolutely.
everything. And for me, I have a good friend of mine. I tell the story all the time. She does an amazing job, amazing single restaurant. And she says, I know my brain tells me I need to franchise, but my heart tells me no, because I don't want to let go of what I have.
Yeah.
And she's I don't care who comes on. If she hires a consultant, they help her to get 2 restaurants and she will fail. She's not meant to do 2 restaurants. So,
Interesting. Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with that. So I absolutely loved it. So help our audience to understand a little bit. What are some of the impacts you had with some of the restaurants? Where did you start and where did you pick them up and where did you leave them after you guys were done with the program?
Well, I have to share actually a recent story. This just happened in the last 60 days. So a year ago, I got an email. We'll say that their names are J and C. First initials, their names are J and C.
Mhm.
If they ever listen to this, they'll know exactly who I'm talking about. I got an email from J and C just through our regular, contact me on the webpage
Mhm.
about 14 or 15 months ago. Their email said, "We don't even know where to start."
Wow.
Husband and wife had purchased a restaurant in a tourist town in Western Canada. Mountain biking in the summer, skiing in the winter, some shoulder season kind of thing. Super busy with travel and hotels. They're right on the freeway, good opportunity. Neither of them had ever owned or run a restaurant before. So I get this email says, "We don't even know where to start." So we started by, okay, let's look at what's happening. Let's look at the concept. Let's get clear on what the concept is, what you're wanting to achieve, what the
Mhm.
roadblocks are, what you know and what you don't know, what resources you use, what resources you don't even know exist. All those types of things from an assessment perspective. And then we started, taking steps to implement really specific data-driven strategy. Things like menu engineering. Why is your menu priced the way it is? Assess the drink specials, the food specials. I always tell people, if you're going to put something on special, if it doesn't drive guest count or average check, it's probably not the right special to have. So
Agreed.
all of those things went one by one by one. I got an email from JNC about 60 days ago, and they just sold their restaurant for a huge profit
That's awesome.
and said, "We're going to take a year off and go traveling together and relax." And they're in their late 30s.
Mhm.
I mean,
That
for me,
that
I don't know where to start. To we sold the business for a profit and we're going to go travel around the world is a pretty good, start to
I
finish.
I absolutely love that, and congratulations on that. And to our listeners, if you guys feel you don't know where to start, there's a guy right here. I want you to reach out to him. So, uh, Jim, before we kind of pivot here, um,
Mhm.
why bold operation? Why would you write a book with all the other stuff you're doing? You're a busy guy. Why would you want to do a book? So, talk to us a little bit about your book.
So when I had going back to the accidental entrepreneur thing, when I had no plan and I wasn't sure what I was doing, I didn't have a marketing budget. I didn't have, I hadn't sort of saved up for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years to launch a business. I didn't have a marketing budget or any of that. I just started generating some content, talking about
Yep.
the things, like I said, what was I hearing from restaurant operators? What was I seeing? What were my friends telling me? What I'd experienced? And that became a core part of what we do at Benchmark 60 is create content around restaurants. So we
Mhm.
have daily feed content. We have 2 newsletters. We're about to launch our 3rd podcast. And so there started to be this collection of information and positioning and content, and to the tune of about 1,000 pieces a year of content.
That's
And
amazing.
at one point, a friend of mine actually said, maybe you should just put that all in one place so that people can have access to it. And again, so I was an accidental entrepreneur. I was also an accidental author. It just kind of happened.
That's amazing. So talk to us a little bit about the book overall. What
Yeah.
what is the key learning around that?
So the concept is the broad concept is that it's based around building a strategic foundation for excellence in restaurants. But we
Mhm.
go through in each chapter. There's 10 chapters. Everything from how to identify and support people from a mental health perspective in restaurants, all the way through to what technology you're using and what should you consider.
Yeah.
And my favorite part of the book, um, besides the intro that mentions my wife and my daughter, my favorite part of the book is that at the end of each chapter, we give actionable, implementable things that an operator could do like today.
Yeah.
It's not this complicated textbook where you have to think about, well, now what am I going to do with this?
Mhm.
You can read a chapter and implement it in the restaurant today.
That's awesome. We have a copy on order, I heard. So when it gets here,
Oh,
I
thank
will.
you.
We need to do a second version of this
Sure.
conversation because I want to talk a little bit more about that. Because a
Mhm.
lot of books are very intellectual and they're very concept driven. But I realized that restaurateurs are very actionable. Hey, show me how to do it. I get it done. Tell me how to do it, and I will get it done.
Yeah.
So I really love the idea of that. So one final question, then I have a little thing I want to play with you if you're up for it. But last question I have for you today was, for any restaurant owner just starting out, like the couple you had, what is one piece of advice you would offer them to set them apart or set them up for a path to a long-term success?
I think it has to be around the business model part of the industry and the restaurant world.
Hmm.
And I've been in some really constructive, sometimes controversial conversations about what I'm about to say.
Hmm.
I truly believe that the restaurant industry doesn't have a margin problem. It has a business model problem. And it becomes a really, really tight margin industry because the business model isn't set up properly.
Hmm.
So I would always encourage any person who's about to get into a restaurant, or if they currently own or operate a restaurant, things like, don't just look at what your food cost percentage is. Look at
Hmm.
the how much you sell of each item, what their contribution amount is. So actually, how many dollars do you make off of every single item that is on the menu?
Hmm.
And also, the food cost percentage is important. But people get caught up in things like, I don't want my food cost to be 35%.
Yeah.
But I tell people all the time, I would way rather sell a 40% food cost item that makes $15 than a 20% food cost item that makes $10,
Hmm. Agreed.
right?
But
So things like
yeah,
that.
people don't look at it that way. I absolutely love that. That's some really good advice. So, for anybody who wants to know a little bit more about Benchmark 60 and you, how can they find you?
Benchmark60.com is the website, and I mean, there's always an opportunity to go there. Um, I'm the most easily accessible on LinkedIn. We spend a
Mhm.
lot of time on LinkedIn, and I'm active there. Obviously, my name is Jim Taylor. There's probably 1,000 of us, kind of a generic name, but and Bold Operations is the book. My phone number and my email address are in the book, so I mean, I'm
Awesome.
pretty
Thank you.
available.
And we will also add it into the show notes. So for our listeners, if you want to know more, we make sure we're going to put it in the show note. And then also, if you haven't done so, to our listeners out there, go and sign up for the Disruptive Chef Club, which is our private community. You get a front row seat of all the things we do new and improved. And also you get a little bit of behind the scene glimpse on what's coming up. So with that, Jim, we have a question. Are you up for playing something we call rapid fire question food service edition? Let me know if you're up
Sure,
for that. Okay.
let's do it.
So the way this works is really simple. We have 25 questions. I ask you for a number, you give me the number. I give you the question, and then you give me the answer if there is. So if you're up for it, here we go. Playing rapid fire
Sure.
question food service edition. So Jim, question number one. Give me a number between 1 and 25.
25.
25. If you could create a food hybrid like coconuts or durkin, what would it be and why?
Oh, that's a tough one. You're asking someone who's not a chef. Um, it would be probably uh, some sort of chocolate honey,
Oh, I love that. Why? Why?
because well, I'm a sucker for chocolate, but I'm the person who puts honey in my coffee. So if I could have both of those things together at the same time in my coffee, that's probably why I would want to do it.
That's awesome. So, there's a whole group very mad at you because you don't do honey and coffee. Okay, question number two. Give me a number between 1 and 25.
6.
Oh, that's a good one. So, okay, if you were a cooking show, what would be your catchphrase?
Hmm. I'm supposed to be rapid. Geez, this is tough. If I was a cooking show, what would be my catchphrase?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's difficult.
I think it should be benchmark 60. And
Well, maybe bold operations. I don't know. Sure, benchmark.
I like that one. I think somebody should write a book about that. Give me a number between 1 and 25.
10.
10. Oh, that's a classic. Pineapple on a pizza. Yes or no?
Yes.
There's a whole
However,
movement again.
only if it's traditional ham and pineapple. None of this pepperoni and pineapple thing.
I think you try to say that your pineapple should not be on the pizza. Okay,
Sure.
give me another number between 1 and 25.
20.
20. Ooh, what is your secret ingredient you use when making a beverage or food you never tell anybody about?
Whiskey.
I'm with you. Makes everything better. And it lightens the
Bourbon.
mood.
Yeah.
Give me a number between 1 and 25.
15.
Ooh, 15 is a good one. What was the best advice you ever received but never acted on?
Probably that. Oh, that's a tough one. Probably never say no to opportunity.
I love that.
I think there's lots of times in my life that I didn't, even though there's some times that I did.
And I love that. I can have a whole conversation around that because we build a whole business upon saying yes. Okay, last question. Give me a number between 1 and 25.
3.
What is your favorite snack you secretly eat when nobody's watching?
Chocolate chips.
Dipping in it, honey, I would assume. That concludes Rapid Fire Question Food Service Edition. Jim, I really appreciate it. Thanks for doing this, and thanks for being so generous of your time. We need to do a 2.0. I will ask my team to reach out to you because I want to talk more about your book, because for me, that tactical piece and restaurant books or literature is missing, because a lot of people paint this beautiful big picture and really forgetting about the end of the day. What can I do today to have an impact tomorrow? What can I do with my chef to have an impact at service at dinner? And how can I, just have an impact much quicker? And I think that's needed a lot more than it's currently out there in the marketplace. So with that, thanks again for being here today. Thanks for sharing your insights. Thanks for giving us a behind the scenes look on what's going on with Benchmark 60. And I'm excited to have you back. So with that, I want to say thanks for being here today. Means the world to us. So thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Christian.
Awesome. And to our listeners, until next time, remember to disrupt your kitchen, fire up your career, stay hungry for change. I'm Christian. I'm here with Jim, and we are out of here. So we are signing off. So go out there, be the change, be the challenge, and be the chef who sets the world on fire. With that, everybody, go out there and stay disruptive. So Jim, I really appreciate it. We need to do a 2.0.